Now, in order to lose fat, you need to be creating a calorie deficit. As always, sounds like it's deja vu because I do talk about it quite a lot, but the main driver of fat loss is to eat less calories than what you burn off. Therefore, the amount of calories inside a food is arguably the most important thing to focus on when trying to successfully lose fat. Because ultimately, if you continue to eat foods which make it so the amount of calories that you're intaking exceeds the amount of calories that you're burning off, you will not lose fat, and actually you'll start to gain fat. So the calorie content of a food is the most important thing, 100%. But there are other things that you need to focus on, and I'm going to talk about one of them right now. That is simply the type of food that you're eating. Because sure, the amount of calories within a food is the most important thing that you need to focus on, but depending on where you get those calories from and what kind of foods that you eat during the day might impact the ease in which you create the calorie deficit. So I'm going to give you an example. Let's say, for example, you crack open 30 grams worth of Cocoa Pops in the morning with about 100 millilitres worth of milk. That's going to equate to about 130 calories for one little portion. Now, if you're anything like me, who has a very, very big appetite, that's going to do fuck all for your appetite. You're most likely going to be hungry again in the next 30 minutes. Don't get me wrong, cereal's not going to kill you, and it does taste incredible. But when you're trying to lose fat, probably just trying to have a bowl of cereal in the morning isn't the most effective or optimal route to go down. Because ironically enough, if you actually add more food to that cereal and therefore increase your calorie intake up a little bit more so than what it would be normally, you would most likely be a little bit more satiated from that breakfast than if you just had the cereal with some milk on its own. It might seem a little bit counterproductive, like adding more calories to your cereal, but sometimes you actually have to eat more in order to warrant greater effect. It's a bit of a paradox, I get that, but you just got to trust me here. So let's say, for example, you have your standard 30 grams worth of Cocoa Pops, but then instead of adding regular milk to it, you add a protein shake to it. What you've done there is you've increased the amount of calories within that meal because a protein shake is going to contain a few more calories than just regular milk. What you've done is you've added more protein to that breakfast, which therefore is going to make you feel a little bit more satiated than usual, and therefore you're going to feel way less hungry than usual as well. Take a step further and add some fruit to it as well. Not obviously to the cereal itself, but eat it alongside that. What you're doing is, once again, you're increasing the amount of calories you're intaking for breakfast by about 100 calories, but you are most likely going to be more full for longer than if you just had the cereal on its own with some milk. And if you're full up for longer, that's going to stop you from snacking as much between breakfast and lunch. And it's also going to make your life of creating a calorie deficit feel way less misery inducing. So sometimes you've got to increase the amount of food that you're eating in order to decrease your overall calorie intake over the day. Because sometimes it's about the type of food that you're eating and how these types of foods are going to make creating a calorie deficit easier. Because once again, calories are the most important thing about fat loss. It's the sole driver of fat loss to be creating a calorie deficit. But what's the point in creating a calorie deficit if it just makes you hungry and miserable? You need to try and find ways to try and make that easier to do. And the best way you can go about that is attempt to try and increase the volume of food that you're eating whilst keeping your calories low, and try and keep as satisfied as possible, because so many people approach creating a calorie deficit in the worst possible way. They approach it by thinking, right, I need to eat as little as possible. That is the wrong way to think about things. Instead, you should be thinking, what's the most amount of food that I can possibly eat while still being in a calorie deficit? And if you approach it like the latter rather than the former, not only will you be creating a calorie deficit and by expansion losing fat, but you'll also do it in a way which doesn't make you want to sit on a cactus and swivel. You won't be miserable, you won't be hungry, and it will make losing fat 10 times easier. So much so that you can actually sustain the results rather than sustaining them for a couple of weeks and then falling off track. If you like this video, make sure that you give it a like. If you've got any questions, feel free to comment below because I'd be more than happy to answer them for you. And if you want to catch any more free fitness or fat loss based tips without any of the bullshit, as always, make sure that you're either following my Instagram at k.p_health or subscribe to this channel. Peace.